This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Dustin. Today we are talking to Lori Reising, and how I know Lori is I put an ad out looking for a co-host, and a few people responded, and she was one of the ones that I had really good chemistry with, and was able to carry on the conversation for damn near 2 hours. And that's always a good thing when you're a podcaster, because sometimes trying to pull teeth out of people to get them to talk or conversate is difficult. So it definitely was a nice change. Also, what we're going to be doing, she's going to tell us a little bit about her story that she has, but it's basically an introduction to her, because she will be joining me on some of these episodes in the future, talking about a number of different things. We're both single, both talk about dating. We're both in the dating pool. Currently, I online date. I don't know. I'm sure that's what you do too as well. You can tell us about that, but let's introduce Lori. Lori, how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you very much, John Dustin. I'm happy to be here. Stoked to have that kind of chemistry. I do love to talk.
Me too.
I think that's why we're both in the podcasting world, right?
Yeah. Do you ever find yourself getting in the way of and not, like, you're supposed to be there talking about your guests, and it just always ends up magically rolling right back around to you?
I think the last edit I did, I was noticing and I think it's not really a strategy, but I always have it in the back of my head, like, I can edit this out, but if I bring my experience to the story, I think it makes it a little more dynamic with their reactions. And so I always end up making a lot more editing work for myself by doing that. But I do take a lot of stuff that I add to the conversation out, just because we are supposed to be focusing on them. But yeah, I mean, that's my roundabout way of saying I have to check myself every once in a while with that.
Yeah, it's tough.
But I love hearing people's stories, and that it's equally as important. And that's why I think I do it as well, because I want to hear people's stories, and I want their stories to be experienced for other people, and so on and on we go, and the stronger we get.
Yeah, it's an art form. I've had to kind of figure out how to hack my own behaviors and tendencies of what I like to do when I'm on the mic. And one of the things that have really helped kind of curb that, and so the whoever I'm talking to kind of has a little bit of a backstory on me, is I just send them one of my episodes that I was a guest on somebody else's show. And it just sort of gives them my story. So now you have something to pull from, that questions that you may want to ask me, because the conversation ends up being a little bit more authentic and flows if you know something about me, and I'm not the only one that knows something about you.
That's interesting. I like that. I can always tell when guests have listened to my previous podcast, or if they haven't. If they decide to check me out once I've asked them to be on the podcast, then I can tell that they're like, okay, I got your vibe, like, I'm in with this. And the ones that haven't, it's like you said, sometimes it's like pulling teeth, because I try to tell them, like, hey, I really want to talk about serious stuff, but I want it to be light as well. Like, I like to flow in and out. I really think laughter is medicine, but I also think our dark and our pain is very healing, and liberating. And I had this one guest, and he was like, yeah, no, it's fine. It'll be great. And I was like, okay, well, if you say something that you don't like, or if you cough or something, just repeat it and I'll edit it out. He's like, oh, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. It was not fine. It was intense. That was like one of those episodes where it's like crickets were chirping most of the time. And I was like nervously digging deep within myself. I was like, where do I go? How do I move this? And I think that's what you're saying. That's the art form to it. And it's really fun to, even in those hard moments, find that creativity. It's almost like a self-reflective therapeutic process. You learn so much about yourself in the journey of figuring that out.
Absolutely. And to kind of help with what you're talking about, another thing that I do is so that the guest form, that really serves as my backup. Okay. So, and then when I don't send them one of my episodes, which it's kind of like if I'm sending them something that I did, like my first one I was sending out, but I felt like, okay, now maybe people might think that that's a cheap ploy for me to try to get listens on that one. So I switched it to somebody else's podcast, not my own. And so like, no, I'm not trying to, help myself at all here. This is somebody else's. I'm a guest on their show. So that they're getting that listen. And so once they have that and they do the guest form, so the guest form has all these questions that I can draw from if I get into the space that you're talking about, where it's like, well, where do I go? Where do I go from here? I don't know nothing about you. So I've got all this stuff that I can just pull from. Oh, okay. Well, what about here? It says when you were a kid, you did blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
So,
I kind of like that nervous excitement though. It's like that, right before you start a big game or something, like it's kind of like do or die and you've got to figure it out. Like, I don't know. I think that kind of excitement rush is really fun.
Yeah.
And we always have the fallback of like, oh, we can edit. You know what I mean? So that's really nice as well. But no, I like that. Maybe I'll use this one to send out to people because I don't ever tell them to listen to my podcast. I just think it's interesting to notice the people that decide to, because when I invite a guest onto the podcast, I look up every podcast I can find about them and I listen to every single one. I just listened to 5 in a row about my next guest interview.
Wow.
Because it's really important. And I did that not only to find out more about her, but I don't want to have the same thing that everybody else has. Like everyone had kind of the same format for her. And so she's saying the same thing over and over again. And she probably gets a little bit tired of doing that as well. So I'm like, all right, how can I make this more exciting and dynamic? If somebody's going to try to listen to everything that she does, I want them to listen to something really like new and unique with my podcast.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can dig it. I see what you're doing.
So I got you.
So let's talk about you. Let's get to the meat of this. So you have a story, right? That you can add to the bottoms and life struggles portion of what I do here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all do. You know what I mean? Like we all have our story, and it all is important for everything that we are and every way that we become. And so I think that that's what. That's why you're doing what you're doing, because you believe everyone has a story and you want to talk about it and you want to put it out there for more experience and more support for everyone else's story. Right. So, yeah, I have a story. I for sure have a story.
Well,
I don't even know where to begin. Like, should I just start from like when I was born?
Yeah. So when I was born, it was midnight on the dot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know all that info. I've got, my star sign, my rising sign, my moon sign, if you want all that.
So I would suggest pick a bottom or a time in your life when you struggled the hardest or that was the most defining for you, and then if you have anything from your childhood that kind of played a part in how you ended up there, that kind of ties it together. But if you don't, I mean, not everybody has something from their childhood that crosses over to when they're an adult and is part of their story.
Oh man. Woo. How much time do we have?
I have till 12:30, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I have an abandonment wound. I was adopted as a baby, and I think that informs much of my struggles throughout life, for sure. And I'm continuing to work through abandonment wounds and birth wounds and things like that. So, and it really weaves into my story very, very heavily. Like, I don't even know if everybody would be ready for that kind of heaviness, in an intro. But what I will say is my bottom was when my first child was stillborn. My daughter was stillborn. And what I'll say is my husband at the time, her father, I had fallen in love with him when I was 12. And so that definitely ties into my childhood. We were kind of in and out throughout our lives. It's been a lifelong journey for us. I think it's probably lifetimes of journeys for us. And we got back together when we were 29, got married when we were 30. I moved back to the Midwest for him I was living in the Pacific Northwest, where I live right now, beautiful Portland, Oregon. I love it here. This has been my chosen home for 20 years. But when we got back together, I just went home for a quick visit and met up with him. He had split from his previous relationship, and it was just kind of like this story that we needed to finish. We needed to see how it would become written out. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that that's what drove me to move back to the Midwest, because that's just not my home anymore. This is my home in the Pacific Northwest. And so we got married when we were 30, pregnant while we were still 30, but almost a year later, I would say. And then when I was 31, we lost our daughter at 6 months pregnant. And that devastated my life. It absolutely shattered me. It shattered him. He has his own story, and I won't try to speak to that. He's had a lot of loss in his life. And so we both had such a deep, deep depth of sadness and grief with her loss. And it was sudden. It was very tragic, and it was releasing her from my body was a very, very difficult process. It was a 10-day process, a 2-hospital stay process. It was, I haven't like spoken about this in detail in a really long time, but, you know, she would have been my only biological relationship. You know, I didn't grow up with my parents, my biological parents, and I didn't have any siblings. And so losing her probably was the most tragic thing that I could ever go through, based on my history, you know, based on my own abandonment wound, and feeling like nobody had wanted me in my life. And I wasn't wanted. I was given away. Why didn't they love me? Why wouldn't, they want to keep me? That's like a lot of, I always wanted to work with adopted kids because of growing up with that narrative and that story in my head and believing I wasn't worthy or I wasn't lovable. And Dean had loved me since I was 12 years old. So of course I was going to see that through and try it at least, try to see where that love would go. So moving forward, I got very sick because they had left her inside of me for so long. And so I was very toxic. And my marriage was completely falling apart because of the grief and the pain. I probably cried every day for at least 5 years, probably. And, it's funny. Just yesterday, I went back through my journal where I was writing poetry after her loss. And I was reading what was happening in my marriage while I was falling apart because I no longer had my daughter. And I no longer had the life that I was planning on and expecting. And 2 years later, we got pregnant again. It was a very long 2 years of trying to get pregnant and also going through the grief of not having her. And her name's Dunia Eve. And then I miscarried that child, and that broke us. We weren't ready to go through another kind of loss like that. We weren't strong enough. And so then, along with losing my health, losing 2 children, I lost my marriage. And it took everything that I don't even know how I lived through that period. Like, I wasn't myself. I was a shell of myself. I was a shadow of myself. And somehow I knew that there had to be something more to life than crying my eyes out every day for so many years. And the only thing I could think of is that I needed to get back to Portland in order to find out if I could have a life where I didn't cry every day. Because where I was so stuck in that story and that experience that I could not see any kind of healing happening. And it wasn't that I wanted to leave my husband. It was that I wanted to save myself. And I still loved him, and I still love him to this day. and I'll never stop loving him, and we aren't together anymore, and it's been a very long journey of figuring that out for us. And so I drove out to Portland when I was 34, I believe, and loaded up my two cats, and he kept the dogs, and took my car, and I drove out, and I just remember I was holding the steering wheel, and I was crying. I was crying so desperately throughout that whole trip. And I remember I would look at my wrists, and I just would imagine on my wrists were tattoos, and one of them said trust and one of them said faith, because I just had to believe that there was some kind of life that I could get to that I wasn't even close to being in touch with for so many years. And so after I got to Portland, I mean, this story it's my entire 30s, you know, like of health, of what's the word I'm looking for? Disintegrating health, of like using all of my money to try to get my health back and get my life back and even try to smile again. It took years before I could smile again and feel like life was worth living. And so I don't know how many, I'm just going to show you. I don't know how many years it was, but one day I was trying on clothes in this dressing room, and I was like, I have to go get that tattooed. I have to go do it. And so I didn't do it on my wrists, but I put it on my arm, where I tattooed trust and faith on my arm that day. And I feel like I'm talking a lot. Do you want to throw something in here?
No, it's your story. That's,
yeah.
You know, I'm letting you,
okay.
I'm letting you run with it. So, I mean, you know, we're trying to get to know who you are and what you've struggled with, and where you're at.
Okay. So what I did is, when I came back out to Portland, I threw myself into, I'm a body worker. I do trauma-informed body work. I'm now a pelvic floor therapist. I'm also a transpersonal hypnotherapist. I have a BA in psychology, and I do a lot of energy work and healing work as well. And I threw myself into working in fertility, because I do, with my body work, I do a lot of fertility work. I do a lot of prenatal work and postnatal work, especially with the pelvic floor. But I threw myself into that work because I felt like I wanted to help other women who had went through losses and miscarriages. I wanted to help them get pregnant again, have subsequent pregnancies, and hopefully have living children, because it's something that I was not experiencing. And I hoped that if I could help other people do that, that I could experience it as well someday, or I could at least heal, because I lost so many friends. I mean, it was like I was a death version of myself walking around. I couldn't be with people. I couldn't be around children. I couldn't be around babies. I left all of my friendships that had children, and I was really hard to be around. I don't know how anyone stuck by me through that time. And Dean continued to try to stick by me, but I literally felt like I was dying. Like, my physical health was so bad on top of the grief that in a small town in Iowa, you don't get the support that you need in your healthcare world, especially when you're looking for a holistic approach. You know, I went to so many doctors, so many specialists. No one could help me. I was just hemorrhaging money to try to get help and to try to figure out how I could heal myself so I could have a living child. And so, you know, coming to Portland, I started getting those holistic practitioners that could start figuring out what was going on with me, and that could start breaking. I mean, I was almost in the emergency room every day. I would lay on the floor and I couldn't breathe, and I was so sick, but no one wanted to get close enough to me to like care. You know, it was too much. I was like too much. I was too much grief. I was too much pain. I was too much sickness for people. And so I was at this all by myself while I was still trying to salvage a marriage, long distance, because I wasn't ready to let him go. He's the father of my children. I'd loved him since I was 12. And so it took years. And we went in and out for years. He ended things with me and got married to someone else. And that was like another death for me. It was like I was still in love with him, and he just needed to take care of himself. And so I became quite the alcoholic that year. That was my whiskey year, which I don't drink whiskey anymore. But I seriously had to believe that he was dead, because he wouldn't even speak to me. He started this other life, and I was kind of left on my own, still working with my healthcare and trying to get well. And I was trying to date because I wanted to have a child. I wanted to have a family. I was in my 30s, so I guess fast forward to now, my career is built on helping women have children, and it bit by bit over years, like I said, this is my entire 30s that I went through this process. I was able to hold babies. I mean, I'm kind of like a newborn baby whisperer. I actually do craniosacral on them, and somehow I hold them and I can know what they need. And I help them, with better breastfeeding rates. I help them sleep at night. I help their digestive move better. I help them have bowel movements. And I just don't even know. It just like comes through my hands. So I have this like really special power with them. And now that I can be with them, I can have my friends with children. I have a godson that is so precious in my life that I spend so much time with. And in those years, I never could have done that. And so I pushed myself so hard to do this work, to heal myself. It almost killed me. Like I almost broke and died throughout my entire 30s. And now I am at this place where, we have finally ended our story. We just ended our story. I'm talking about my ex and I. We just ended our story about maybe 2 years ago. So that's a long story. And it feels really good to have that liberation from that, because there's always this grief with us. Like we love each other so much, but if we try to be together, there's this like overwhelming grief that we can never like supersede. Like it's always kind of hanging out with us. And I don't know, I don't think he's done his work around all of his loss in his life. And that was a problem because I wanted to do the work. I didn't want to cry every day. I didn't want to be that person. I love laughter. Seriously, I smile more than anybody I can think of. And I never thought I would smile again. So I think my tenacity comes from, I will push myself to get to that to get to my goal. Like I wanted to enjoy life. I didn't want to live like I was dying, which I did throughout my entire 30s. And guess what that means? It means I never had a biological family. And that, I'm going to be working through that for the rest of my life, but it's also not going to take me down. I'm also going to really enjoy who I am, what I've done, what I've brought to people, the healing and the work that I've been able to offer to families and women and all people. I feel like I've been able to offer that. Like I'm going to live this life to the fullest. And I'm also going to be sad that my daughter's not here and my children aren't here. And I'm also going to be sad that it looks like I won't have a biological family and I'll never get that biological connection. I didn't have it with my parents. I won't have it with a child. And yeah, I feel like that's really unfair. And also life is we're not here to just have this fair life. Life is messy and it's hard. And it has to be worked on. And I just got this quote yesterday. It was so good. From this, I think she's a scientist, Susan something. Of course, I don't have it in front of my face, but it said something like the price admission to life is discomfort. The price admission to a beautiful life is discomfort. And I loved that because it's true. There are times when I feel like, why do I have so many struggles? Why, right? That's very victim-y. But when I talk to light workers and intuitive workers, which I invite into my life because I'm one of them, they're always like, you go through the struggle so you can help other people. Like you get it. You can empathize. You understand. You're going through that experience and you can share that with this world. Like that's your light and that's your star work that you're doing. And I'm like, God damn it, I didn't want to, I don't want to be that. I didn't want to be the mother left here, when my daughter's, she's around me. And so I think that I'm really grateful that I can be with the pain of what I won't have in this life, but I can also be with all of the things that I will have and all of the things that I am. And I can smile and I can laugh and I can appreciate the earth and the beauty. And even in the chaos that we're in right now, you know, all of these experiences have prepped me for what we're doing right now. You know what I mean? Like when you go through that kind of pain, when you go through a death of yourself, especially when you go through the death of a child, you know, a true death of a child, I think that you're prepped for anything that comes your way. I can never imagine going back into that shell of a person that I was for those years. You know, so I think, I don't know, maybe I'll wrap it up there.
Well, you answered the question.
That's my bottom story.
Yeah.
I have lots of top stories though too.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. I mean, I have a little bit about me. I don't know if you knew this, but I have a daughter that she's 20 now. Yeah, she was born in 2000, so she's 20 years old now. I don't really talk to her. I'm friends with her on Instagram, but her mom had my rights terminated when I was, you know, going through my drug addicted phase, and like I could have showed up at court and contested it, but I mean I was busy partying, and I, you know, convinced myself that she'd be better off without me anyways, and so like I have that, and so it bothers me sometimes, but I mean I've done my due diligence to try to reach out and, you know, hey, you know, if you want to know anything about me or whatever, fine. I'm just like leaving it in her court. You know, I don't want to like be pushing like, well, are we going to meet yet? Or, you know, or I don't know. It's just a weird situation. And like, but with my daughter that I have now, like I'm super vigilant about like how good of a dad I am, because it's like I have this void over here where I screwed up and you know, let something that was, you know, that most people, like I took for granted. I took that for granted, you know, and so I really try to do my best with my daughter now, and she's almost 3, and man, the one thing that I'm just gonna say one thing. The one thing that I learned about having a child that I didn't know. Like I was going through life thinking that I you know, in my past relationships that I, you know, loved them or been in love or anything like that. And the one thing that I can probably say is that I had love for them, but I didn't understand what love was until I became a parent. I didn't understand what that feeling was, you know. I mean, there's you think you know, but you don't know until you actually have somebody that you're willing to do anything for, you know, like anything. And so yeah, it kind of like making me think like, oh, maybe I never have loved anybody in my life other than myself and you know, parents, you know, siblings, stuff like that. But I mean, like like somebody else, like you know, I don't know. Maybe it was some stoned edible talk. I don't know.
Love is interesting because I think that we experience different types of love with every love that comes into our life. You know, and you don't know how high that can go until that love comes into your life, and you're saying that's your daughter. You know, it doesn't mean that you didn't love anyone before, because you probably loved them with where you were at and what you had available to love with. And then your daughter comes in, and that elevated, that raised the bar so high that you didn't understand that was even capable, that you were capable of that kind of love. And now you have that kind of love, and who knows, maybe you'll feel a love at that level again. Maybe you won't. You know, and maybe you'll feel a love in a different way again. But I think that's the beauty of love. Like we can look at everybody that we do have love for in our lives, and it doesn't negate the fact that it's love. It's just they're different experiences of love.
Huh, that's a good way to put it. I didn't think about it.
I don't know. You know, I think with my dating, and I think that this is really, you know, I'm in therapy because there's a lot to work on, a lot to unpack with everything that's went down in my life since being adopted. And I think with my dating, like I worry that I loved my ex so deeply and especially because he's the father of my only children, even though they're not here, they were my only children. They were in my body, they were created in my body. And I just think for a long time, I think he held, I kept that emotional cord with him for so many years, even when I dated other people. Like, I don't think there was any room for anyone to, break through that cord or get enough of my heart, because he had so much of my heart. So I'm really grateful that we've been able to play that relationship out and play that emotional tie out, where I feel like we now have freedom. Like, now I have freedom in my heart for someone to get that kind of love from me. And of course, now we're quarantined. Now I can't even actually see anyone.
Yeah, forced celibacy is what I've been calling it.
Yeah, I've been through plenty of like chosen. So I feel like I'm born again once I actually get to be with somebody, because I didn't date for 10 months because I was dating my podcast before this went down, because I started my podcast and that takes so much time.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, I think I'm going to be born again by the time I actually touch someone again.
And that's another, a tricky thing too. And I think this will lead right into why I chose you to talk to and be a part of this journey that I'm going through. One is that you're a little woo-woo. Okay. I'm not going to lie. You're a little woo-woo.
Oh, I'll own my woo-woo. I'm all about my woo-woo. And I'm also super like country girl grounded, but go ahead.
But I'm starting to, I know that there's something about energy out there. There's something about the universe. There's so many things that have happened in my own life that can't be explained by anything else, whether you want to call it God, Gaia, whatever your fucking term is that you want to use to call it, whatever, but there's something to it. And like I just can't deny it. And so in reading some of your stuff online when I was researching you a little bit, that kind of was what drew me to you, is you have that, you believe in that energy but you're like that squared, you know what I mean? Like more than me, like you're really into it, like, but there's something to it. And so I like that. I like people like that, and also the dating aspect of it, because you definitely bring a different take on dating than I would probably ever bring, because I'm one of those guys that I don't know, man, when it comes to dating, I mean, I'm very open about where I'm at and what I'm willing to give, and it just doesn't seem like, as honest as you can be, it doesn't. Women always seem to want to try to change you still. I can break past the friends with benefits gate, and that they think that they can do with me. There was one that I'm talking to recently, and it's the same thing. It's like I'm available for one thing, and we can hang out and I'll give you everything of me when we're hanging out. But after that, I'm a selfish person when I'm trying to accumulate my goals, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like, all right, I'm not willing to sacrifice not having sex. Fuck that. You know what I mean? I like that connection. And for me, it's fun. And for women, they just can't do it that way. Some of them can,
women.
but some of them can, but I haven't been able to find them. All right. The ones that don't get attached, that don't like.
Are you being honest with what you're looking for though? I think it comes down to that.
I think so. I'm pretty sure I am. I don't hide behind the fact that, I send them to my first episode. If somebody I'm going to start talking to, I send them to my podcast. I say, hey, go listen to this. You may not like me. And this will just be a really quick, you know what I mean? You can get an hour dose of me, and you can tell right then if you're going to like me or not. And that way it'll save you time. It'll save me time. I don't want to have to fuck around and deal with any of the back and forths.
Right. But are you telling them that you're not available for more than like,
sex?
Momentary connection?
I
I mean, I'm going to call it momentary connection, but you can call it sex.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been pretty.
I mean, you actually have to use those words. Like women need to hear exactly where you're at. And then, yeah, there's still going to be some women that think, oh, but if we have this connection, like it's going to, change what he wants because he's going to feel, because women can be really fluid that way, like we can like move with a connection. And if we wanted one thing, but if suddenly our hearts and our estrogen and our oxytocin get pumping, we're like, oh, wait, maybe we want this thing. Like maybe this could be good.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think it's like the difference, like women are much bigger multitaskers than men. Men have a goal. They have the one goal. They're focused on that goal. They're going to do that goal, and not a lot can sideline them or sidetrack them from that. But women, we have like all of these things because we're multitasking all the time. So we can like be pulled from one thing to the next with ease. Like, and that's a generalization, of course. Everyone has their own personal experience and boundaries and hopes and expectations. But honestly, I think if you really put that out there from the start, like, hey, I'm a busy dude, I've got a lot going on, I still really enjoy connection. So if you're down for momentary connection, and it doesn't mean it will be the only time, it could be more than once, it could be for a while. Like, I mean, you're basically describing what I would take on as a lover. I just had a lover. He was my last person that I was seeing before. So 10 months ago is when we stopped seeing each other. And we were both just really honest in the beginning. And he was honest too. He's like, so this is just going to be fun, right? But we really dug each other. Like we had such an awesome connection and it was so great. And the sex was incredible. It was so freaking good that there's moments in my woman brain that I was like, maybe this should be a relationship because we laugh together. We have like incredible sex. Our sexual chemistry is off the charts. Maybe it should be a relationship, but he never went there because he had the one goal in mind. You know what I mean? He was like, no, this is like, it's just for fun. Like, we're not going anywhere deeper with this. And my brain was like, maybe I should go deeper. But then of course I would like be in the situation and I'm old enough and I have enough experience that I'm like, no, I don't want that forever. Like, I don't want that as a relationship. So we had a fantastic love affair. So I think if you use those words, like words are really powerful. So if you tell women like, I'm looking for a lover and like, do we need to define that? Like, I'll define that for you, then women still might try. They still might like grab hold a little bit. It's really, this is so important. And this is what I think men don't understand about women. There's so many, there's a lot of things that women don't understand about men don't understand about women, but our estrogen and our oxytocin like floods our systems, and those hormones can be like really mind shifting. They can make us feel kind of cray cray, right? It happens. I just had my period this week and, I went through a day of like only wearing my robe and not getting out of bed because like my hormones were making me sad as fuck. But it's the reality of being a woman, right?
Yeah, it's it is what it is. It's a constant like just trying to find your person is just, it's the older you get, the harder it gets because you've
Oh my
already,
God, I know.
you have all these experiences and wisdom of what you don't want, or things that have failed in your past. Like for me, I've five failed relationships, and most of them are probably because of me. I mean, there's a little bit, that has to do with the other, the other parties, but I would venture to say that, yeah, it's probably me. It was me mostly, and not being.
Well, that's amazing. You're like owning up to your part in what happened. So you're owning up to it, but are you actually learning from it? Like, are you actually applying some lessons for your next relationships? Are you just saying like, yeah, it was probably me, but now I'm still looking? Or are you actually looking at like, what was it? What was your behavior in that relationship that maybe led to its demise?
Yeah, I've done some of that personal growth work and looked at my own anger issues and how I responded to things that would cause some of the problems and the issues that I was dealing with. And but that still didn't stop the like the like I still have that same. I don't know how to explain it, man. I don't
The
I don't.
behavior.
No, it's just it's like as far as like I always felt like there's like I'm settling, you know what I mean, or like there's something something coming down the road, you know what I mean, that I need to be ready for because, whether or not, this person gained weight or, you know what I mean, wasn't what I was looking for body wise or, there was just always something. And so I
So
just,
you got like the grass is greener mentality.
yeah, it's the way it's always been. And so with that would always, that got me to thinking even more about, okay, well then maybe is it that I'm addicted to sex or the chase or everything that revolves around that, you know what I mean? Because once I'm there, it's cool and I'm having fun and I've made connections, great sexual connections with people, but it just I don't allow myself to take it any further than that. You know what I mean? Because it's like all right, well, I've got what I'm trying to do, and you're just it's gonna, I think it's because I'm not settled in my own life and my own path of where I want to be, that I'm not
Mm-hmm.
willing to like settle down with somebody that doesn't fit what my idea is. I don't know, man. It's so crazy when it comes to relationships. I suck at them. That's why I jumped at the opportunity to talk about relationships in a with somebody else with the opposite sex who's in the same situation, because my take on it is way different than yours.
Yeah. I have to ask, I was going to ask this before. Are you a Pisces?
No, I'm a Sagittarius, so that plays a big part too.
Sagittarius.
Yeah, I'm the
Huh.
I'm half man, half animal. The archer, the hunter.
Yeah. Well, I'm an Aries. We got a lot of fire going on here.
Yeah. Did you notice because Portland is more of a wet climate, it's closer to the water.
Hmm.
Midwest, far away from the water, hotter, well,
Oh, I
or
grew up on the
colder,
water.
I don't know, depending on where you're at. But
Hmm.
what I found is when I lived in Vegas and Phoenix, I did horribly in those climates. Like, just
Yeah.
my
Mm-mm.
life was like not balanced, a lot of trouble, a lot of stuff
Mm-mm.
that I don't know. It was
It's too much
different.
heat.
Yeah, it's too
It's too
much.
much fire. It's too much heat.
Yeah, and as soon as I came back to the close to the coast in California, where I'm near the water, life just kind of like got better. So I
Mm,
don't know if there was something to
yeah.
that or not.
Oh, yeah. I think absolutely. I mean, water is very healing in the first place, but I think people that really resonate with water, that, you have to be near it. Like, that's always my first thought when people are like, oh, you love the heat. Why aren't you in the desert? And I'm like, no, no, no. I love the heat, but I love the water. I love being by water when there's heat.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, the two have to be in balance for me. And I mean, for me, my like witchy baths, like, they are an absolute must. I have to be them. Yesterday was the new moon, so of course I was in my witchy bath last night, crying like I do because I like to let those emotions out, and then waking up today and feeling great. Like, I need that water fix. I need that hit, I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah, I have it right. I
Mhm.
have it too. So if you go all the way to the back, there's a levee, and then behind that levee is the water.
Nice. Yeah, no, I actually grew up on the water. My parents had a little lake house. And so I've been doing water sports my whole life. I'm
Okay.
actually very, very much an athlete, and I was a professional water skier.
Oh wow.
And so now I am big into surfing. And so I haven't surfed for a year, and it's killing me because I was in a car accident and I couldn't surf for a long time. And now we've got this going on. And yeah, I cannot wait to get back to the water and get back on my board for sure.
Yeah, I'm not. I tried to. I'm a water person too. I have I had boats and I have two jet skis now that I take out all the time in the summertime. But I mean, I tried to. I was water skiing, single skiing, double skiing. What is that other one? Wakeboarding. And I even tried to do the wake surfing, which I like a lot better because when you fall down, it doesn't hurt as bad. The wakeboarding is just not, that wasn't my cup of tea, man. You had to go too fast, and I made the mistake of watching a YouTube video before I went out once, and yeah, ended up getting a
You try to
concussion.
do a flip. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to do something that was a fail for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't fuck with that anymore. But I do love to be on the water. The jet skis are, they're perfect for me. So
Yeah.
uh,
Nice.
so what did you kind of envision when we were gonna talk about doing something together? I know we'd thrown out a couple of different ideas, but they just sort of like seemed like they would have been way too involved for our time to be able to put into something.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about like trying to do like a coronavirus or a COVID dating game, which I think was a great idea. I still think it's super fun, and I think it would be great, but it is a lot of work to put that together. And I think we're both hustling right now, and we're putting out content. And I know I have like 5,000 projects in the mix that I'm trying to get done during this time before I do go back to work. And so it just seemed like that was a little overwhelming. And and we both did this, which I didn't know we were, but kind of as a tester, I did a Zoom date last week or the week before. Cause I was like, oh, maybe cause there's this guy, we've been on each other's social media for a while, and I dug like what he's doing. He's homesteading and he plays music. And, I was just like, oh, maybe I should check him out, and I should make this a date and see how it goes. Like I wanted to take a shower. I wanted to like dress up for something, so it just gave me kind of this excitement of like, all right, so I'm going to try this out. And then I asked him if I could record it, because I was like, well, it could be a cool podcast. This is what I did during my quarantine, and I did this date, and I recorded it. And then I was like, no, nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
So then I kind of lost my, as fire signs, we get really excited about projects, and we get really like into like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And so when you and I were talking about it, we were like, yeah, this is going to be so great. Like, let's put out let's get on the online apps, and let's put out a call or whatever. And then if we don't feel that a return is happening on it, then we just lose interest.
Yeah,
and I think that's what happened for me with that, because I did that date and I was like, nah, like it's not dynamic enough for people to be really interested in listening to something like that. Like, I think it would still be fun because you and I approach dating in such a different way that if we like got all these applications together and then we were like having one person that we were setting up with somebody, like who would you set up with them and who would I set up with them? And then if we compared those two dates, I think that's the fun part of what we were talking about. Like, because we're approaching it in such a different way, and then to see what, person A, the common denominator person, how they felt about both dates. And then we could have like bantered about like, why we picked the person for them, like what we were seeing that would have matched up, and what we didn't see in the other people. Like, I thought that was the dynamic part of what we were going to do.
Yeah. There was definitely a couple of different ways we could have went about it, but in the end, it's time. Definitely would have had a lot to invest in that, and I think that maybe it might be able to come to fruition down the road. But I think talking about dating and just having a variety portion of this, either we talk about dating or we talk about current events or whatever it ends up being, it just brings a little bit of a lighter side to what I'm doing. Because some of these, like the next one I'm getting ready to release, I mean, man, this story was really hard to listen to, and then to see some of the pictures that he sent me of where he was. I was like, man, in between that, you got to have something lighter, or else, people are just going to come to your show and just be bummed out.
Yeah.
Here.
I mean, I agree. I understand, because in my show, that's what, if I have like 2 serious episodes in a row, I try to put in something lighter, because I completely agree with that sentiment. Like, life is really hard for everyone. You know what I mean? And so we're all kind of working with our shadow and working with, what's coming at us, like even just, with quarantine and physical distancing. And it's a lot of change. And so listening to other stories can be really helpful because we can see ourselves in those people, or we can, grab glimmers of hope and light if we're going through something like that. But I think you also need to have, the lighter part that like creates even a bigger hope and I don't know, a more balanced expectation for people, I guess. And people need to laugh.
Yeah.
Even when they're going through really hard stuff, I think it's really important that people still laugh. Like when I was going through some of my darkest days, I forced myself to watch Arrested Development. And it didn't necessarily make me laugh at the time, but it actually distracted me enough and put my like mental health into a light enough place to deal with so much heavy and so much dark and so much crying. So I completely agree with you. So if I can be that like lighter insert that you're doing with the heavy shows, like I'm stoked to do it because I am smiling a lot and I am laughing a lot. And this is, where I want to be in life after, 10 years of dark and heaviness. Like I'm in for the laughter, even through the hard stuff. I'm still going to have hard stuff. We all are, like we have to embrace it and open up to it, but we can also laugh. We can also create those endorphins in our body that help us work with the dark a little bit more.
True. And I also think you'll challenge me too. Because maybe the way I look at things in dating isn't the right way. Maybe how I approach, this or that, just because it's in my head and I've been doing it for so long, it seems like it might be the right way. But, I'm always up to, being challenged. I'm not married to any idea for sure. If I'm doing something.
I love being taken out of my box.
Yeah, for sure. I can totally agree. So hopefully that's what we're going to be presenting to you coming down in the future, some of these future episodes. There's going to be a ton to choose from. Like I was just telling her earlier, I have, by the time the first of the May 1st comes around, probably having in mid 30s of what I'm going to have to put out and work on. So definitely won't be a shortage of content for you guys out there to listen to. Some of them may not make it. For sure. Some of them might just get, shoveled over to the Patreon page and, bonus content, because not that they're not worthy of being on there, but there may be some stuff that, is similar to something that I just released maybe 2 weeks ago. So I'm not going to want to put too much of the same stuff on that. So, well, we'll see. The great thing about podcasting and getting into it the way that you and I did is that it's ours. My show is my show. I can do whatever I want with it.
Yeah.
If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, you can't make everybody happy. But I mean, I do take suggestions. Oh
yeah, my mom just last night I was talking to her. I listened to your latest episode and I already knew, like I could tell she was going like dark with it. Right. And I was like, oh yeah, what'd you think? And she's like, well, why did the first interview have to be like, fuck you and fuck this and fuck that? And I was like, okay, let's calm down a little because that's not what happened. She didn't say fuck you. And I was like, that's how she was getting her point across. It's not for me to censor anyone. However anyone wants to speak, they're going to speak, and she's just like, well, I just don't understand. I'm like, well, that's okay. You don't have to understand, but they're not you. You're you and they're them. And so, you're not going to please everybody. There's some episodes that she absolutely loves, but believe me, she'll tell me her opinion about all of them. But she's one of my biggest fans and that's fantastic, but I love the creativity of it. Like, I feel like I have like invoked this creative force in me that was maybe a little bit asleep for a while, and it's like, there's so much creative avenue, like so many creative avenues to go through. I was stoked about the episode I just put out because I was laying in bed one night and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to do it like that. So I just changed the format completely up. And I felt like that was really much more engaging for listeners and it would keep them more excited about the episode. It was so much more work for me in the editing room, like such a bigger process. But in the end, I was really stoked on how it came out. And I had never even thought about doing that. And just one night, it's like once you start like moving your brain in that creative like wheel, things just kind of come and they pop up. And I love how I'm doing new and innovative things and like not being afraid to tackle them, like, and I think that's when you're saying this, the thing about your podcast is it's yours. Nobody's telling me what to do or what not to do. And so, it's just the only person that would stop me is myself.
Yep.
And, I'm a fire. I'm going to do it. Like if I think that the goal is going to be good or the end goal is going to be good, then I usually go through with the torture of the work,
For sure. For sure.
And right. You're doing like a freaking 8 interviews a day, like 6 to 8 interviews a day. I don't even know how you do that because they take a lot of energy.
Well, what made it easy was, I got the it was the Linktree. The Linktree simplified so much for me because now I can just send somebody there to. You can either listen to my story, decide if you want to be on my podcast. You can check out my podcast. You can go to my scheduling page. You can check and see if my merchandise. You can do everything about me, my Facebook, everything everywhere you can find me is in that Linktree. So
and where do you use the Linktree?
Instead of send like somebody says, hey, give me your email address. I'll just send them the Linktree because there's a link to it. That'll take you directly to my email address. There's a link that'll take you directly to my Twitter. All my social media, there's my Facebook, my scheduling page, my anywhere that you can I'm at it you can just go in there and look. And so it makes so when you're trying to tell somebody, so like my only days that I'm available to do these interviews is Thursday and Friday, and I left it open all day long. And so now when people, they just go to it and they just schedule a time. And depending on, how much they've filled out, I mean, I've already got your information. I've got your email address, although I'm not collecting email addresses, which I need to start doing. And I don't have a website because all that costs money. And so the one thing that I was talking to a guy who has been in this space for a long time, and he's like, if you're going to spend any amount of money right now, the first thing that I would tell you to do is go get your website. Go get a website and start collecting email addresses or building up an email list. And he's like, and then the next thing you need to do is give somebody value in wanting to go to your website and then get there and be able to collect their email. And so whether it's you want to offer them a 20-page Kindle book for free that you wrote, or it's something that you can give away to them for free that is from you, that will bring them and give them some value to want to give you their information. Yeah. And so
I'm working on my e-guide today.
Yeah. I'm like, fuck, that's awesome. I got to write, and I fucking hate writing. I don't like writing at all. I'm a good writer, but I'm good at writing what I want to write. I don't, necessarily, like if I can, I was telling somebody, if I can get a ghostwriter to just like follow me and listen and just take down all my stories and put them all together for me, put it into a book and sell it, and then you do all the work. And then I'll take a little bit of money because I want to make something. It's my damn story. But I mean, I'm lazy like that.
Yeah. Well, writing takes a lot of energy because I've been doing writing and podcasting, and I think that they both take energy. But podcasting is a little easier because it's like, it's fun and easy to like sit here and have a conversation and have a back and forth. And I love the interview process. It's so like, if it wasn't for this, obviously I wouldn't be doing it. But the writing, like you're sitting there putting in all the work for a really long time, hoping for a return. You're not getting the immediate return that a conversation has, like the interview has. And so it's just a whole different beast.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that right now, and it's intense. So
I'm going to have to do it at some point, but I'm not looking forward to it. Like I try to write copy for my intro because I want to have something that I can just, all right, I have it. I just need to insert it, and then I'll do a small snippet recording of, the guest and introducing. So I'm trying to like shorten my intros and my outros to keep people engaged because somebody goes, dude, your shit is way too long in the beginning. It took me 5 minutes to get to the damn episode.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well,
I
you know,
usually, I think I have a 5 to 7 minute intro, but that's like, talking about the episode, that's introducing the people, that's talking about, whatever, usually I'll throw in something about a past episode or something like that. And then I have my actual intro as well, like with the music and like who I am. I think about that too. But a lot of people have, like when I listen, there's a lot of people that have those long, especially if they have sponsors, because they have to do the ads for the sponsors, who is it? Is it Dax? I listen to Dax Shepard a lot, and maybe his intro is like crazy long. No, it's Russell Brand. I think his intro is like so intense.
Really?
Like sometimes I'm just like fast forwarding and I'm like, when am I going to get past this? Sometimes I'll listen to them, but if I really just don't have the time, like I think everybody can fast forward. Like I get it. Like you want to be listener friendly as much as possible, but you also have things to get out to the world as well. And I think that's your opportunity to get those out. Because I keep my outro like really short and sweet, and I do more at the intro because that's when people have more energy to listen.
Yeah. There's no right or wrong way, man. It's just a matter of finding your group and getting them to engage with you. And it's an organic process. I mean, like all these guys, I mean, the like for like, the listen for listen, the follow for follow. I mean, that's great to get your numbers up, but I mean, how many of those are going to just follow you and then, they're going to go back through their list and then pull you out and they got you. I've seen that happen quite a bit.
I've never done any of that because you have to look for quality. Like, if you do the research, like even on all those podcast pages, I've kind of stopped inserting my, when they're like, oh, put your podcast on here. I'm like, these aren't the people that are going to listen to my podcast. They're not looking for they're not looking for something new to listen to. We're all here trying to like promote our podcast. So those aren't your listeners. So I never have done that like for like thing because I'm like, you're not really interested. Like I want the people that are really interested that are going to explore my different episodes and like they're going to tell somebody else about it because it really impacted them and made a difference. And, if you're just, doing one listen, you're not the person that I'm looking for. So I need to spend my energy in different ways, finding those people that really care, that really have the time, and they're looking for something to add into their life.
Yeah. That's a good point. I like the way you think. That's why you're here.
I mean, it doesn't happen fast.
No, it doesn't.
It is not a fast moving process, but that's where the patience comes in. I just constantly am telling myself like persistence. I know it's good content. I know that this feels right to me. And I know that there's abundance for everyone. And sometimes it takes a long freaking time to find it. It's not like it just happens. But I'm always listening to those stories of people that have huge followings now. And, in the beginning, like they worked their ass off. And I feel like this is the hardest I've probably ever worked in my life for something. And so I'm not going to give up. When you work that hard for something, why would you give up? Like you keep going, even if it doesn't happen on your timeline. We're such an immediate culture. We want things to happen quickly and perfectly and immediately. And that is not life. Life is messy and it's not perfect. I was just listening to this doctor yesterday because I've been doing a lot of like coronavirus research because I want to be prepared, number one, for me and my friends and family, but I also work in healthcare, so it's important to me. And I loved what he said because he was talking about an antibody test that's going out now that's different than like the actual corona test to see if you test positive or negative because there's a lot of false positives or false negatives. I can't remember which one. Anyway, with the antibody test, one of his, he always gets people that are commenting and thousands of people are following him. And there's always the people that throw something, difficult or a harder question in. And somebody's like, how can you be, promoting this test? It's not FDA approved and blah, blah, blah. And like something else about it. And he's like, you know what? No, it's not FDA approved yet. Like it's not to that level. It just came out and nothing's perfect. If you're looking for something perfect in this coronavirus situation, you're not going to find it. None of the tests are perfect. None of the, medications that we're even coming up with yet are perfect. The ventilator usage isn't perfect. Like, you're not going to find it. And so I started thinking about that. I was like, what is it about our culture that we expect perfection? You know what I mean? Like, we trust so much and we expect perfection out of so many things. Like, what we're really learning here is fluidity and adaptability that we didn't have before, because we are so rigid. Like, no, this is the way life should go. This is the way it has to go. And it's like, we just had this expectation, like, why should we have to be in quarantine? Like, that's not how life is supposed to be. We're supposed to have our freedom, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wait a second, where did you come up with this perfection in life? Because we're organic beings. This is organic matter around us. Like, shit happens. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't even know where I'm going with that, but it's been this like really big thought process that I'm like, because I just wrote this piece about humanity. And so I'm really looking at like, why are we expecting so much perfection in our lives? And I can apply it to, growing my audience for my podcast. I expected perfection. I'm like, no, I'm putting out great content. Like, why am I not getting the numbers that I should? And it's like, wait a second, why do you expect that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So did you, speaking of Corona, I had an episode that I put out. I think it was about Jake Cusdy, and he's an inventor, and it's something in addition to it's blood oxygenation and in conjunction with the ventilators. And it's actually a really good episode. You should check it out.
Was he talking about the red blood cells?
Well, he's talking about oxygenating the blood along with, because when the lungs start filling up with fluid, they're not able to get enough oxygen into the bloodstream, but also the carbon dioxide is not being able to be expelled as well because you're having a hard time breathing. So you're creating toxicity within your system, and then oxygenating the blood is helping with the helping take some of the pressure off of the lungs and the ability of the lungs to have to work so hard to get oxygen. And then also used with a small dose of immunosuppressant keeps because the infection, the reaction to the infection is actually what's creating all the fluid and the phlegm and everything else in the lungs. Right. So
it's the cytokine storm, but that doesn't happen to everyone. Because I just did an interview with a doctor yesterday, and we talked all about this because we were talking about the fear language around this. Because we're hearing like, oh, okay, so it's the cytokine storm, which is like an immune response, and so the immune system is attacking itself, and it's and this is going into the lungs and the respiratory system, and then we get lower levels of oxygen because the oxygen can't get into those red blood cells, and like there's this whole process. But it's not. But that's what I want to say is it's not happening to everyone. Most cases clear up on their own. Most cases have mild to moderate symptoms. The cases that are severe develop the cytokine storm. So I just want to put out there that not everyone is going to develop the cytokine storm, and so we do have to look at that.
And so what he had come up with was a quick way to retrofit an already existing, and this is for the people that are experiencing that. So like the worst of the cases, the people that are on the ventilators and everything else, that he's developed a retrofit to an existing blood oxygenation machine, and also what was it? It was a kidney dialysis machine. So you retrofit this dialysis machine with this piece of equipment that can be installed in 15 minutes and is readily the dialysis machines. There's tons of them in these hospitals. So he's trying to get it FDA approved. Is
he a scientist? Is he a doctor?
No, he's an inventor, but he's working with a bunch of
inventor.
Yeah, but he's working with a bunch of doctors, and you should listen to the episode. I mean, he's trying to get more exposure with this because he's talked to Ben Carson, and they just kind of like, because they got a lot of stuff that they're probably getting thrown at him right and left. But this would be a quick way to kind of alleviate some of that. And save some lives because of the oxygenation and everything else and the immunosuppressant.
Well, right, because if you have to use a ventilator, what happens is the ventilators are usually what's causing the death.
Yeah.
because the ventilators are putting too much pressure into the lower lungs, and they're not, the alveoli aren't strong enough to withstand that pressure. And so then we get blood clots and we get organ system failure. I mean, I'm going to say right now, I'm not a medical doctor. I do work in the healthcare field, and I've talked to a lot of people about this. I've been doing a lot of research. But what I taught, my interview yesterday with the doctor that I'm putting out next week, is about how do we help support your immunity so you don't become a severe case. So that's, we're focusing so much on like when we get that cytokine storm and what's happening, like getting the ventilators and doing all this. Well, there's huge side effects to the medications that they're using at that point and the ventilators. But I love that he's coming up with something that could hopefully counteract the the destruction that the ventilator might do to the lungs, and the oxygenation is what it sounds like. So yeah, I'll absolutely listen to that. But I think it's important to look at how do we, because a lot of us are going to contract this virus, over the next 2 years until maybe a vaccine's, we don't even know what's going to happen with a vaccine. But what we need to look at is how do we support your immunity so that you have a strong immune system, so that you're in the mild to moderate cases, so that you don't become a severe case. And I think that's important to be talking about that for the majority of people, especially while we're in physical distancing, where people can be working on their immune system in various ways, so that we decrease the severe cases. The less we have those cases going into the hospital, the better for everyone, for the hospital workers. But I love that there are people that are really working hard to change this. And, that's what the thing is. We have such amazing like minds and inventors and people that can come up with fantastic things, and I think it's really important that we look at that, because in times of war, people create anything that's needed to defend the country. And this is a time of war, but our government's not looking at it like that, because we're not having to defend our country, right? And so I think it's up to more of the people, like who you had on your podcast, to be defending our people, because it isn't a time of war, but it's a different type of war. Yeah, you know what I mean? And so that's great that you got him on and he's talking about it, and I'll totally listen to it for sure.
All right. Well, we are at an hour and 12, and I need to skedaddle because I got actually got to eat something real quick and move on to the next one at 1. So go ahead and plug all your places where people can find you, your podcast, and then we'll sign out.
All right. So my podcast is The Raw and Wild Hearts, and my website is www.therawandwildhearts.com. Instagram, The Raw and Wild Hearts. I make it pretty easy. Just get on the Raw and Wild Hearts, and you'll find me somewhere for sure. I'm on all podcast platforms, the usual. But, my website is probably the most central, where you can find everything in that place.
And if you didn't catch that, it'll be in the show notes. So you'll be able to find her wherever you need, and she'll be back. She'll be coming back here on a regular, hopefully, maybe once a month. We'll see how it works out, or how the schedule works out, and what we're able to do with it. But this is a great start, and that's usually where everything needs to begin. Just start.
Yeah, I just got to plant a seed.
Yep.
Now we just got to water that motherfucker.
Yeah, right. All right, Lori. Well, I appreciate you stopping by and talking with us today, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, Sean. Have a great day interviewing. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.